Are you worried that at some point Americans are going to feel like there's a bunch of billionaires in Washington who are playing Russian roulette with our retirement?
$2 trillion deficits don't bother you at all. How could you ask me, while we're running a $2 trillion deficit, and not care? You're destroying the people who have run this country before, are destroying the future for my children and my children's children.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick giving a rather fiery description of the massive budget deficit. Now, his comments come as the debt continues to climb at a staggering rate, reaching above $36.5 trillion. Now, I just want to show you a visual of how massive the debt really is. You can take a look at it there. If you stacked $1 billion worth of $100 bills into a pallet, you would need to cover 3 football fields before reaching just $1 trillion. That is insane. So in order to reach the colossal $36 trillion debt level, you could literally stack up these billion-dollar piles into dozens of skyscrapers, surpassing the size of the Statue of Liberty. Look at that right there. Whoa. That's a lot of debt.
That's why Mr. Lutnick was concerned about it and redirecting the interview. But for more on this, let's get to some experts. Let's welcome in GOP strategist and executive vice president at the Commonwealth Foundation, a friend, Jennifer Stefano, and professor of economics and dean of the Robert W. Plaster School of Business at Cedarville University, Dr. Jess Haymond. Good morning.
Morning.
Dr. Haymond, let me start off with you. 36 trillion, I mean, that is a massive number. I don't think there is a magic bullet to this, but maybe you have some ideas on how do we whittle this puppy down.
Well, the first thing we have to do is what Doge and Mr. Trump are trying to do right now is you've got to get a handle on spending. Historically, we're just a little bit above what we were at the end of World War II. And the way that debt came down was not through a lot of budget surpluses over the years, but through growing spending at less than the rate of economic growth. So Mr. Trump's focus on economic growth is a proper route in part, but growth alone will not solve this problem because the spending is still growing and it's growing exponential on especially the entitlement programs, which heretofore both parties have not wanted to address. So that's at least the beginning baseline of what needs to be done.
That's the first time I've seen that clock. I just had to ask if it was live, and that is crazy.
Before you ask your question, I mean, our next guest, Jennifer, she was part of the Tea Party movement as well as myself and Deneen Borelli back in the day. And I think the deficit then was about 10 trillion. Jennifer?
Right. And I think for too long, American presidents and American politicians, both Republicans and Democrats, haven't addressed this issue. So there needs to be a significant amount of education right now coming out of the Trump administration for people to understand just how devastating this is for our country and why we need to do what we're doing in D.C. And I think that messaging and how they talk about it is going to matter. The 3 biggest drivers of our budget are the military, Medicare, and Social Security. These are things nobody wants to touch, but they are the 3 biggest drivers of the federal budget. Now, there are other areas that can and should be cut. I'm thrilled what they're doing with the Department of Education. They're right to look in other areas, but we have to explain how dangerous it is to have this kind of debt. And certainly there's some indication that societies where debt spending surpasses military spending, you're looking for a societal collapse. It puts you in a position of weakness to our enemies. And I think there has to be more messaging and education about this and to be relentless about it and to take the hits. I think Americans will understand, but they really need to explain it well. The Trump administration does.
Yeah, Doctor, this obviously doesn't happen overnight. This is going to take a really long time to get this down, as Tom mentioned. But what can the Trump administration do to set up the future administrations so they can continue with these policies?
Well, they've got to get some of these Doge cuts implemented into law to make it harder for new spending to happen. I'm reminded of that adage, how someone became bankrupt. At first, it was slowly and then suddenly. We've got to avoid getting to the suddenly part. So the good news is that there could be fairly minor corrections that could be done if politically they were able to do things like extending the age limit for Social Security, slowing the rate of growth on some spending levels. I mean, if we could grow at 3% per year and have a deficit that was only 2% per year, over time we could do what we did at the end of World War II, which slowly, as the economy grew, solved that problem. So that, I think, is a key part of it. For them to really implement and put in some of these things legislatively, so it will be more difficult for another administration to go the other direction.
Okay, a little pivot here. Jennifer, I want to jump to the CPI numbers that came out this week, showing that inflation cooled to 2.8%. And this breaks an upward trend we've seen since last September. Jennifer, is this putting Trump putting our economy in the right direction? Do you see his fingerprints on this?
So I think any president who is overseeing an inflation decrease should, yes, be given credit for the changes. But what you have to understand is, while we all talk about charts and graphs, and I went to business school too, I love to discuss that. I love to discuss the Michigan. I think the consumer price index tells a very different story where people are uncomfortable because these charts and graphs don't immediately translate into improving kitchen table economics. And that's what you have to understand. I think that the numbers go down are good. I think we can credit President Trump, but I think what you have to realize, the real danger zone is it doesn't automatically translate to lower cost. Once inflation hits, once things go up, they tend to stay there, right? And then it can level out. So I think we're going to have some challenging times ahead. I think the key is to continue to invite investment and businesses and opening and people putting money and down here in the United States, opening manufacturing plants, right? It's hard to just pick that up and leave and go somewhere else. And I think those type of investments will continue to help with people if wages can go up.
All right, we do have to leave it there, but thank you so much for breaking all that down for us. Jennifer Stefano, Dr. Jeff Haymond, we really appreciate your time today.